Have you ever noticed that every time you decide to change your life, there's a voice inside your head that whispers, "Not today, tomorrow, next Monday, next month, next year"? For most people, that voice sounds like common sense. But what if it's the reason you're still living the same life you wanted to escape years ago? Here's the frightening truth. Your brain doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care about your goals. It doesn't even care about your potential. Its first job is to keep you safe. And in your brain's eyes, safe almost always means staying exactly where you are. So every time you try to start something difficult, exercise, build a business, learn a new skill, change your life, your brain fights back, not because it hates you, but because that's exactly what it evolved to do. The good news, once you understand how your brain really works, you can stop fighting against it and finally make discipline feel almost effortless. This isn't about becoming stronger. It's about becoming smarter than the oldest part of your own mind. Chapter 1. Why discipline feels so hard. David always believed the problem was himself. Every unfinished project, every missed workout, every promise broken felt like another piece of evidence. I just don't have enough discipline. Maybe you've said the same thing. Maybe you've looked at people who wake up before sunrise, exercise every day, build successful businesses, and wondered, why can't I be like that? It feels personal, like there's something wrong with you. But what if you've been blaming the wrong person all along? And here's something most people never realize. Your brain was never designed to make you successful. It was designed to keep you alive. That single purpose has shaped every instinct, every emotion, and every decision for hundreds of thousands of years, long before cities, long before schools, long before alarms, deadlines, and gyms. Your ancestors lived in a world where every mistake could be fatal. One wrong decision could mean starvation, a broken leg, could mean death. Trusting the wrong stranger could cost everything. Survival wasn't guaranteed. It was earned every single day. This is where evolutionary psychology gives us an incredible insight. The human brain wasn't built for the modern world. It was built for a world that no longer exists. Yet remarkably, it still runs many of the same survival programs today. Your brain doesn't know the difference between hunting for food and preparing for a job interview, between escaping a predator and starting your own business. To your ancient brain, both feel uncertain, and uncertainty has always meant danger. Now imagine you're living 20,000 years ago. You've spent hours searching for food. You've finally found enough to survive another day. Would it make sense to waste energy running in circles? Of course not. Every calorie mattered. Every drop of energy could mean the difference between life and death. So evolution rewarded one simple behavior: save energy whenever possible. That strategy helped our ancestors survive. And because they survived, you're here today. The problem is, your brain never got the memo that the world changed. Today, no lion is chasing you. No famine is waiting outside your door. But your brain still whispers the same message. Stay comfortable. Stay where it's familiar. Don't take unnecessary risks. That's why getting out of bed feels harder than staying under the blanket. Why opening Netflix feels easier than opening a textbook. Why scrolling your phone feels effortless, while exercising feels exhausting before you've even taken the first step. It's not because one activity is objectively harder. It's because one feels familiar and the other feels uncertain. To your brain, comfort feels like safety, and safety has always been the highest priority. So the next time you tell yourself, "I'm just not disciplined enough," pause for a moment. Maybe your brain isn't trying to ruin your life. Maybe it's doing exactly what millions of years of evolution taught it to do. But if that's true, then one question becomes impossible to ignore. If your brain is programmed to protect you, why does it seem to crave distractions more than the things that actually make your life better? The answer lies in one tiny chemical that quietly shapes almost every decision you make: dopamine. Your brain is living in the wrong century. For hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors lived in a world that was brutally simple. Every single day was a fight to survive. Food was never guaranteed. Shelter could disappear overnight. A single mistake could cost everything. If they wasted energy, they might starve. If they trusted the wrong sound in the bushes, they might never return home. Every decision had one purpose: stay alive. Your brain was built for that world. And here's the fascinating part: it still is. Although the world around you has changed dramatically, your brain hasn't had nearly enough time to catch up. Modern civilization has existed for only a tiny fraction of human history. From an evolutionary perspective, your brain still believes you're living on the African savanna. It doesn't see a job interview. It sees uncertainty. It doesn't see starting a business. It sees risk. It doesn't see public speaking. It sees the possibility of rejection. And thousands of years ago, rejection from your tribe could actually mean death. Today, no predator is hiding outside your front door. Yet your brain continues responding to uncertainty as if your survival depends on avoiding it. That's why trying something new often feels strangely uncomfortable before you've even begun. Think about your first day at a new school, your first job interview, your first time driving a car, your first presentation in front of strangers. Nothing dangerous was happening, but your heart raced anyway. Your palms became sweaty. Your breathing changed. Your brain wasn't reacting to reality, it was reacting to uncertainty. To your ancient brain, uncertainty has always been closely connected with danger. But survival wasn't only about avoiding danger, it was also about protecting energy. Imagine walking across endless grasslands, searching for food under the burning sun. Every unnecessary step burned precious calories. Every wasted movement reduced your chances of surviving another day. So evolution rewarded something incredibly powerful: efficiency. The less energy you used, the better your chances of staying alive. That survival strategy helped your ancestors survive long enough to become your ancestors. The problem is, your brain still follows the same rule today. Whenever it sees two possible choices, it quietly asks a very old question: which one requires less energy? Stay in bed or wake up early? Watch another video or study? Order delivery or cook? Scroll your phone or build your future? Most of the time, your brain doesn't choose what's better. It chooses what's easier. Not because it wants to ruin your life, but because that's exactly what kept humans alive for thousands of generations. Suddenly, many of your daily struggles begin to make sense. Maybe you were never fighting against laziness. Maybe you were fighting against millions of years of successful evolution. But if that's true, another question appears. If your brain is so good at protecting you, why does it seem to crave endless scrolling, junk food, notifications, and instant gratification far more than the habits that actually improve your life? The answer lies inside one tiny chemical that quietly influences nearly every decision you make: dopamine. David finally understood that his brain wasn't trying to destroy his future. It was simply trying to keep him alive. But one question still refused to leave his mind. If his brain was designed to protect him, then why did it make scrolling through social media feel easier than reading a book? Why did junk food seem more exciting than healthy meals? Why was it so much easier to watch another video than to build the life he truly wanted? The answer begins with one small molecule that has quietly shaped human behavior for millions of years: dopamine. Many people call dopamine the pleasure chemical, but that's only part of the story. Dopamine doesn't simply make you feel good. It makes you want to chase what might feel good. Long before smartphones, streaming services, and endless notifications, Dopamine helped our ancestors survive. Imagine walking across endless grasslands searching for food. Most days there was nothing to find. But occasionally, hidden beneath a tree or behind a group of bushes, there was fruit, or fresh water, or an animal to hunt. Every unexpected reward increased the chance of survival, so evolution built a powerful learning system. Whenever something valuable appeared unexpectedly, dopamine encouraged the brain to remember it and search for it again. Curiosity became an advantage. Exploration became a survival skill. That system helped humanity survive for thousands of generations. The problem is, the world changed much faster than the brain did. Today, your brain is surrounded by rewards your ancestors could never have imagined. Every notification, every short video, every new message, every like, every swipe, every refresh. Each one whispers the same promise. Maybe the next one will be even better. Your brain doesn't know the difference between searching for food on the savannah and refreshing a social media feed. It simply recognizes the possibility of another reward, and possibility is often more powerful than the reward itself. That's why it's so difficult to stop after just one video, or one notification, or one quick check. You're not chasing what you already received, you're chasing what might come next. Psychologists call this a variable reward system, but you experience it every single day without realizing it. Sometimes you find something interesting, sometimes you don't. Because the reward is unpredictable, your brain keeps searching. Casinos have used this principle for decades. Slot machines don't reward every pull. They reward you just often enough to keep you pulling the lever again and again. Today's digital world follows the same pattern. Every scroll could reveal something funny, something shocking, something inspiring, something completely unexpected. Your brain keeps saying, maybe the next one, maybe the next one, maybe just one more, while minutes quietly become hours. The tragedy isn't that your brain is weak. The tragedy is that modern technology has learned exactly how your ancient brain works. It doesn't force your attention, it competes for it, and it's getting better every year. Suddenly, David remembered every morning he promised himself he would exercise. Every evening he planned to read. Every goal he postponed after checking his phone for just a minute. Maybe discipline wasn't disappearing. Maybe it was being outcompeted. Every instant reward teaches the brain to expect easy satisfaction. And when that happens, meaningful rewards begin to feel slow. Building a business feels slow. Learning a skill feels slow. Reading a book feels slow. Exercising feels slow. Not because those things lost their value, but because your brain has become accustomed to receiving rewards without waiting. Once David understood that, something inside him changed. For the first time, he stopped blaming himself. His brain wasn't broken. It was following rules written long before the first city was ever built. But if the brain can be trained by modern distractions, could it also be trained in the opposite direction? Could discipline itself become rewarding? That question would change everything. David used to believe that discipline meant forcing himself to do difficult things. Wake up earlier, work harder, resist every distraction, push through every uncomfortable moment. But the harder he pushed, the more exhausted he became. Eventually, he always returned to the same habits. Then he discovered something surprising. Truly disciplined people don't spend every day fighting their brains. They quietly change the game before the battle even begins. They understand one simple truth. Your brain almost always chooses the path that requires the least effort. Instead of trying to become mentally stronger every single day, they make the right choice easier than the wrong one. Imagine walking into your kitchen after a long day. On the table is a bowl of fresh fruit. Hidden inside a cabinet is a bag of cookies. Most people think discipline is resisting the cookies. But the smarter strategy began long before that moment. It began with deciding what would be easy to reach and what would not. Your environment quietly shapes your decisions far more often than your motivation does. David decided to test this idea. Instead of promising to read for an hour every night, He simply placed one book on his pillow every morning before leaving home. That evening, when he entered his bedroom, the book was already waiting for him. He didn't need to remember. He didn't need to feel motivated. The next step was already prepared. A few pages became 10. 10 pages became a chapter. Not because David suddenly became more disciplined, but because starting became almost effortless. Then he tried something else. He placed his running shoes beside the front door. His workout clothes were ready the night before. His water bottle was already filled. The next morning, there were fewer decisions to make. And fewer decisions meant less resistance. Researchers often describe this as reducing friction. Every unnecessary step gives your brain another opportunity to choose comfort instead. Remove those steps and the desired behavior becomes much easier to begin. David noticed another pattern. Every time he finished a small task, no matter how simple, he allowed himself to appreciate the progress. Not with expensive rewards, not with endless entertainment, just a quiet moment to recognize that he had kept a promise to himself. That small feeling mattered. Your brain learns through repetition, but it also learns through positive experiences connected to those repetitions. When small victories feel meaningful, your brain becomes a little more willing to repeat them tomorrow. David stopped chasing perfection. Instead of saying, "I'll exercise for an hour," he said, "I'll put on my shoes." Instead of saying, "I'll write 10 pages," he said, "I'll write 1 sentence." Those tiny actions looked almost insignificant, but something remarkable happened. Once he started, continuing felt much easier than starting. The hardest part had never been the work itself. It had been crossing the invisible line between intention and action. Every small beginning quietly weakened that invisible barrier. Weeks passed. David's routines no longer felt like daily battles. They began to feel familiar, almost automatic. Not because he had become a different person overnight, but because he had patiently taught his brain that these new behaviors belonged in everyday life. Discipline had never been about suffering. It had always been about designing a life where the right choice became the easiest choice to make. And if your brain can learn one pattern through repetition, it can also learn a better one. That realization would lead David to the most powerful lesson of all. David expected change to feel dramatic. He imagined waking up one morning as a completely different person, more disciplined, more focused, more productive. But that morning never came. Instead, something much quieter was happening. Every time David chose to read a few pages instead of endlessly reaching for distractions, something inside his brain was adapting. Every morning he put on his running shoes. Every evening he prepared for tomorrow. Every small promise he kept to himself became another tiny signal repeated again and again. The changes were almost impossible to notice from one day to the next. But your brain doesn't measure progress the way your eyes do. It learns through repetition. Scientists call this neuroplasticity. It is your brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself throughout life by strengthening the connections that are used more often and allowing less used pathways to gradually become less dominant. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. The first attempt feels awkward. Your movements are uncertain. You wobble. You overthink every adjustment. But after enough practice, something changes. One day you simply get on the bicycle and ride. You no longer think about every movement because your brain has already learned the pattern. Building discipline works in a surprisingly similar way. In the beginning, every positive choice can feel unfamiliar. Reading instead of scrolling, walking instead of sitting, preparing instead of postponing. Your brain naturally hesitates because these pathways are still new. But every repetition makes those pathways a little stronger. Not instantly, not perfectly, just slightly stronger than yesterday. David began noticing small changes that would have seemed impossible months earlier. He no longer argued with himself every morning before exercising. He no longer spent 20 minutes deciding whether to start working. He didn't feel excited every single day. He simply started. That was the real transformation. Discipline had stopped feeling like a decision. It had begun feeling like part of his normal life. This is one of the most encouraging truths about the human brain. You don't have to become a completely different person before you begin acting differently. Very often, acting differently is what gradually changes the person you become. Every repetition sends your brain the same quiet message. This matters. Keep this. Learn this. Over weeks and months, those messages accumulate. Tiny improvements become familiar routines. Familiar routines become part of your identity. David realized that he had been searching for motivation when what he truly needed was consistency. Motivation comes and goes. Consistency gives your brain something to build upon. Imagine a narrow path through a quiet forest. The first person struggles to push through the tall grass. The second finds the journey slightly easier. After hundreds of people walk the same path, the trail becomes clear and natural. Your brain works in much the same way. Every time you repeat a behavior, you make that path a little easier to follow again. That is why small actions should never be underestimated. Reading one page may not change your life today. One short walk may not transform your health tomorrow. Preparing your clothes tonight may seem insignificant, but each small action is another step along the same path. David finally understood something he had never been taught in school. Success is rarely built by one extraordinary decision. More often it grows from ordinary decisions repeated with patience, day after day, week after week, month after month. Eventually, the person who once struggled to begin becomes the person who simply begins. And once your brain learns that pattern, it starts expecting it. The greatest surprise was never that David had changed his habits. The greatest surprise was that he had quietly changed the brain that created those habits in the first place. And if the brain can continue learning throughout life, then your story is far from finished. Every small choice you make today is already helping shape the person you may become tomorrow. For a long time, David believed discipline was something he had to fight for every single day. He thought successful people simply had stronger willpower, more motivation, or greater self-control. But after months of repeating small actions, he discovered something that changed the way he saw himself. Discipline was never about winning a daily battle against his mind. It was about patiently teaching his mind what normal looked like. One ordinary choice at a time. At first, every healthy decision felt unfamiliar. Reading instead of reaching for easy distractions. Exercising instead of staying comfortable. Starting important work before waiting to feel ready. Each decision required conscious effort because his brain had not yet accepted those behaviors as part of everyday life. But repetition quietly changed that. The actions that once felt uncomfortable slowly became familiar. The familiar became easier, and what became easier gradually became automatic. David realized something remarkable had happened. He was no longer asking himself if he should do the right thing. More often than not, he simply did it. Not because life had become easier, not because every day felt inspiring, but because his brain had learned a different pattern. The struggle that once consumed so much energy had become surprisingly quiet. That was the moment everything finally made sense. Discipline isn't just something you do, it becomes part of who you are. Identity rarely changes in a single dramatic moment. It is shaped by thousands of small decisions that quietly reinforce the same message every day. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your brain receives evidence about the kind of person you are becoming. Not the person you hope to become someday. The person you are becoming right now. This may be one of the most encouraging truths about human behavior. You don't need to wait until you feel like a disciplined person before acting like one. Very often, acting with consistency is what gradually builds that identity. Your habits shape your brain. Your brain influences your decisions. And over time, those decisions shape your identity. The cycle continues, becoming stronger with every repetition. So if you are still waiting for the perfect morning when discipline suddenly feels effortless, you may be waiting for something that never arrives. Most people never wake up one day loving discipline. They simply continue making small choices until those choices become part of their normal life. Every time you act before your emotions fully agree, you are giving your brain another opportunity to learn. Every time you repeat a meaningful action, you make that path a little easier to follow tomorrow. And one day, almost without noticing when it happened, the things that once felt difficult begin to feel natural. Not because you forced yourself forever, but because you patiently taught your brain a new normal. That is the quiet power of neuroplasticity. That is the hidden science behind lasting discipline. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is this: real change doesn't begin when your feelings change. Real change begins when your actions become consistent enough to teach your brain a different way of living. So the next time discipline feels difficult, remember that your effort is never wasted. Every small action is helping build a stronger pathway. Every repetition is quietly shaping the person you are becoming. Your future self is not created by one extraordinary decision. It is created by hundreds of ordinary choices that almost nobody else will ever see. If today's choice feels small, make it anyway. Your brain is paying attention even when you don't notice it. If you enjoyed this journey into the psychology of discipline, subscribe to WonderThread Labs for more stories where science meets everyday life. Follow the thread. Discover the extraordinary.